From a business standpoint, I think what we've seen in the last 10, 20 years is that there's far more value-based company decision making. And I think the problem is if we are trying to please everyone and we're trying to find ethics for all, we're then not doing ethics, right? Because we're just going to do, some broad, bland statements. It's not just data people that are banging on the data ethics drum anymore.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, Catherine King is here with us today. She is a content creator, moderator, enabler, and instructor in the fields of data ethics and also the broader data analytics space. She is currently global head of brand engagement at Orbition Group. Catherine was recently a speaker at the Ethics in eCommerce Summit in London, which was put together by the Ethical Commerce Alliance, in which we coincided. With her, we have explored a more controversial and practical approach to data ethics under the acceptance that morals reflect a particular stance in a wide range of really important social issues, rather than a universal truth applicable to all. Let's get started. So, Catherine, why are we talking about ethics? Why now?
Oh gosh, it hit me with a hard question straight away. Why are we talking about ethics? Um, I'll flip that, and I think there's so many businesses where you can go in and you say, well, why aren't you talking about ethics, right? And there's that conversation happening. So, why are we talking about ethics? It's front of mind for me. I've been in the data space now in kind of a media capacity for 5 years, spent my career building events and content in this space. And I get to sit on the sidelines in many ways. And what I'm seeing is something that could be potentially quite scary for a lot of organizations, for a lot of industries, that if they don't get this right now, and if they don't at least start on this journey, things are going to become very dangerous quite quickly. That's kind of the scare piece. But also on the kind of more positive side, if you're not considering data ethics and it's not part of your wider data conversation, you're probably not going to be as competitive and you're not going to be as strong as you could be either. So, if we take away the danger, scary horror story piece, it's also that competitive piece. Are you actually going to be the best in your industry and the best in your vertical if you're not doing this stuff?
Do you think people are asking companies, are we appreciating this as consumers and then that's going to mean business? Or are you looking at any other angle?
For me, the world is becoming more data literate, right? When I was first getting into data and, a few years before that, people weren't really talking about data at the hairdressers, at the bar, etc. Now, it might be because I'm the data person amongst my friends and family, but more people are talking about it in situations where I've not brought it up or people haven't come to me and I'm just around these conversations. I mean, so many people know about ChatGPT who aren't data people. COVID did a lot for us in creating this data-driven news reporting where people were wanting to look at statistics and then they were being critical with the statistics by saying, well, hang on, you're not showing this, or what's behind this number, etc. And so people's data literacy is greater than ever. And again, COVID did a fantastic job of blurring that professional versus personal life, and suddenly everything kind of became a bit mixed. And I think that's what's happened with data as well. It wasn't just a case of you go to work and you use Excel and you're in the boardroom and data's discussed, and then you go home and it's never spoken about. There's that blur where data is everywhere. So we've got that increase in data literacy. At the same time as in the news, everything's kind of being reported on with different scandals, etc., of data breaches and all of that kind of stuff as well. So what this does is it creates a really interesting concoction of people generally having a bit more of an idea of what's going on. And what this means is the regulation standard, right, is fairly low. If we're honest, the bare minimum is pretty low standard. Now, all it takes is for customers to realize how their data is being used. And again, that goes into that literacy piece. People are generally speaking getting to have a bit of a better idea of how their data is being used. And suddenly they go, you know what? I don't really like that. That makes me feel a little bit, not so sure. And so they're going to go to the customers, they're going to go to the companies rather, where their data is being used and respected in a great way. Now, in the event that we spoke about there at the start, I used the example of Bloom and Wild. Now, they went out to their customers and said, hey, do you want to receive marketing emails about, I think it was Father's Day or Mother's Day, one of the two. And people opted in and opted out. Now, obviously, there's an ethics piece there to say, we know as a company that these days, these special holidays can be traumatic for some people. It can be for a variety of reasons, right? And we want to say to you as customers, hey, we want to give you the power and say, do you want to receive these comms? Because we as a company want to be ethically responsible, that we don't create a situation for you. And as consumers, they were like, this is fantastic. Yes, I don't want to receive communications for you guys. Love that. Now we see that for so many companies have now replicated that, right? You get it from Etsy, Moonpig, all of these brands. It's kind of foundational standard now. So it's kind of that ripple effect of it. It's been done and it's happened. And the more that we see these consumers acting in that way, suddenly you see this growth in competition. Bloom and Wild now, as a florist, is a higher level, I think, in competition because, and as I mentioned at the event, those people were never going to buy that product anyway. So by giving them the choice to opt in or opt out, you now actually, as a company, are more competitive with your data because you can say, hey, I know that I'm not going to spend my marketing budget and put Catherine's email into this pool of data because she is never going to be a customer for that particular holiday. Or if I go, absolutely, send me all the vouchers and holiday subscriptions for, Christmas, I'm going to double down on that data. What can I do for Catherine that is extra special and be more competitive? And what we see there,
it's even more qualified because by opting in, you've already declared an interest that you wouldn't
exactly,
have if it had been captured
and
without
this is
your
where
awareness.
I think I am probably a more controversial figure when talking about ethics, because I know the core of ethics is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, and the core of ethics is doing the good thing. But in my opinion, good is subjective. And ethics is a very grey area to play in. And I think that that's where we probably haven't seen the growth that we should right now. And that's kind of me standing up and ringing alarm bells. But what we do understand as a business is competition. We do understand dollars. And if I can say, hey, CEO, if you do these things, so use the email example, you are going to have a competitive advantage to this main competitor A or main competitor B. Suddenly, CEO is going to go, absolutely do that. Now, that's under the brand of data-driven decision making and all of those positives. It's data ethics, because really, we're going out to our consumers and we're saying, we want you to have the power with your data. We want you to tell us how you want the relationship with our organization to be. So there's power in that.
So by looking at the outcomes, again, that's the benefit. Then you look at how it's going to be reflected on society rather than how your opinion or your view of morals are simply imposed without regard
Mm-hmm.
for outcomes. These days, when it comes to data ethics, we can also see that there's a reflection of politics. You could use ethics to simply favor one angle or the other. An example, in Germany, gender neutrality applied to the German language has got to such extreme that people don't know what to do anymore. They use X's instead of some characters. Some people say you're breaking the language, we're trying to be too inclusive. Others are saying no, this is ethics. We need to make sure that everything that you generate, if you generate in language or translating, is actually fully gender neutral. It is carrying, I believe, together with it. Some people believe that they're breaking the German language. There was some politician recently saying that. Others believe that German language should simply change and not have gender in some of these words.
From a business standpoint, I think what we've seen in the last 10, 20 years is that there's far more value-based company decision making, right? And if I use myself as an example, I'm a feminist, and I put that out on my social media. I'm an ally as best as I can be, and I'm always learning. It's a journey, and I've had people say, Catherine, you're so opinionated about these things. Aren't you worried that X client won't work with you or this won't happen? I don't want to work with homophobes. I don't want to work with racist people. So I don't mind from my ethics point of view. I don't mind if it puts some people off, right? Because that's my moral compass, that's my choices, my ethics. And I think this is where, as you teed up so nicely, it is subjective. And I think the problem is if we are trying to please everyone and we're trying to find ethics for all, we're then not doing ethics, right? Because we're just going to do, some broad, bland statements. Ethics is going to upset someone because it's going to upset the status quo, especially when we think about data ethics. If we know that society is inherently biased, so therefore the data we collect is inherently biased. So therefore, we need to look at data and say, what is going on here? What have we put onto this data? Have we collected from all groups? Is there assumed things that are happening? So, in this data, if there was some missing attributes for gender, if we look at professions like teacher or nurse, has there been something that's naturally inputted that was a female? What has, let's look into the assumed variables of this, and a business has to take a stance at the end of the day and say, where they fall on this line. Now, into the broader debates, as you mentioned, in terms of society, about German language example, from a completely different angle, this worries me from the people that I know who it would impact, good friends and people that I've come across in life. The majority would say that there are bigger fish to fry. There are others that would say this is really, really important. I'm always going to look at those who it directly impacts. I'm a cis white middle class female. I have privilege in this conversation. So I'm not going to say, changing language, that's not important, because to some people it really might be. To others, they'd be like, I'm not really bothered. I just actually want to be treated like a person and have some civil rights first. That would be great. So again, it depends who you speak to. And this is where it becomes very, very blurry, very messy. And it relates back to the first question of why we aren't talking about it, or why we are talking about it. I think business as a whole can feel a bit paralyzed of where to go in this, because as we've just uncovered in the first, how long have we been chatting now? 20 minutes of our conversation. We've already, weaved in so many different directions that shows the complexities of it, right? And I think what we need to do is drill it down into the basics of, if we take the data stance, your data team, are they as diverse as they can be, or do they all look and sound the same with the same background? Okay, can we have people from different backgrounds sat around the table working on these models, data scientists, data engineers, as best as we can we do that? Now, we know from a market standpoint that there are less women, for example, in STEM. It's better than it ever has been, and it's going to get better. And as generations go on, and we work hard as people in this community to encourage more women and minorities into STEM paths, it will get better. So right now, you need to work harder. If you're a business and you're looking at your data teams and you're saying, hey, this isn't as diverse as it could be, and I know that's going to be impacting the conversations that are happening around the table and the decisions that are happening around the table, that means you need to come to someone like my company, right, where we specialize in recruitment, and say, can you help us with this? Because the chances are the problems are deep into your workforce planning, where perhaps your interview or even your job title and job descriptions aren't teeing you up to attract the right people for what you want. And then it is a really hard, murky, grey area of ethics. So it's really hard. So I'm always very conscious that when I have these discussions, that I don't come in flippantly and say, why aren't you guys doing ethics? Do ethics. It's get on with it. But it's hard, and you have to have that moment in time where you sit down and go, right, we know this is a priority. You can just look at the news and the business articles and magazines and networking groups and WhatsApps, etc., and know that data isn't going anywhere. It's only going to increase. So therefore, the dangers of data, the competitive nature of data, is now something you have to grapple with. It's crucial.
Totally. If we're going to go again with a stick, then we will need a basic set of morals, which we're not going to have. So the positive angle seems to be the right way. What's the benefit of doing this?
To go back to one of your statements at the start about carrot and stick, I'm still a fan of stick. I think the regulation piece is important, and even though it is a bare minimum, and I think it's going to be, I always think it's going to be behind, because especially we're seeing people sign documents to ask everyone to pause for 6 months on AI, because it's getting so far ahead that there's that fear that we can't kind of keep up with it. I am a fan of regulation in some point, because I think that although, yes, there are moral differences in culture and subjective, I think there are some kind of baseline things that we need to agree. In the same way that data privacy and governance, there's some things that we have agreed, GDPR, HIPAA in Canada, CCPA, all of these things we've agreed that this is the base. So I'm still a fan of that, and I think as we work with regulators going forward to write new regulations on this, it's important. It just holds everyone accountable at a baseline. And then that kind of short-term advantage to AI. And I think that the thing is, you almost need people to do it wrong so that you can use it as examples of why it is correct to do. So there's a company recently that's been in the news a lot, used AI to create their models, like literal physical fashion models, and the media was kind of split on it, because on one hand, yay for more representation, but on the other hand, nay for not actually using women of color as models, and just actually using deep fake technology to create that, when they should be elevating people of color in these professions. So you kind of got to sit back and look at these things to go, okay, well, maybe there's a line that you can't cross with that, but maybe you could use AI in different ways that does increase these short terms, and using ethics in that way to support that. But it's almost a compass of what not to do rather than what to do in a lot of cases. I know I used that example at the start of our convo there of Bloom and Wild, and I think that's a great example of what to do. But I think it's easier in a lot of respects to say what not to do, or here's the line that we can draw of how we're not going to use AI when it comes to ethics.
So if everything is a black box, right? How are we going to reward businesses that are more ethical?
TikTok is a great example of this, right? And I love TikTok. I spend too much time on it. I've learned so much from it. I see a lot of gardening and DIY videos, and I'm someone in data who totally understands how this is working, and how they probably have a fantastic little avatar of Catherine somewhere on a database that could tell you so much about me based on what I interact with, what I'm liking, what I'm sharing, who I'm sharing that then with, to build, a network analysis of who those people are. I'm willing for that to happen, knowing full well what's happening, because I value what TikTok gives me higher than knowing, kind of what's going on. So it is really complex. But what I will say is that sometimes these situations need a good social movement. So the example I always like to give in this way is dolphin safe tuna. All tuna used to be a real problem for dolphins, and then there was a campaign that basically said, look, this is really, really bad. And suddenly the tuna companies who put on their branding that they were dolphin safe, and they weren't using nets, everyone, because of this social movement, everyone went and bought that product. And then suddenly all the tuna companies had to do this, because they were like, we're not selling anything, the sales are dropping off a cliff. So suddenly, I mean, the dolphins were very happy about this, I'm sure. But there you go. It's kind of the ethics piece again, and it leans back to that point I made at the start around that kind of competition piece. So I think for a lot of this, it is a case that things will continue, and TikTok will continue doing what it's doing, etc. But then there will be some sort of social movement around AI, around ethics, that everyone goes and knows what to do collectively. And I think this is where that kind of collective movement piece is really interesting. That I think we're beginning to see it, and I think it's not. And it loops back to where we started. It's not just data people that are banging on the data ethics drum anymore. And that for me shows that there's growth in this space, because if you have people in your ordinary life outside of the data space talking about ChatGPT, talking about AI, and having a somewhat informed opinion about it as well, even if it's just a case of I don't like XYZ, or I'm not sure, or I really love XYZ, that's an informed opinion, because you've experienced it, and you have that lived experience. So yeah, I think that's going to be what we see.
Okay, any last thing that you want to mention? Anything you're looking forward to? Some changes that you see coming up? Anything that is about to see the light, or any book we should read? Any last comments?
So I think, in terms of what I'm excited to see, and what I'm, the conference that we attended, that was brilliantly ran by the team. I'm excited by those conversations. I think people, and when you're in those sorts of rooms, you could argue it's a bit of an echo chamber of data ethics people talking to data ethics people. But I think what it does is it creates an environment of people being passionate. I mean, us connecting and doing this podcast episode together, like there's ripple effects from beyond those. So I'm excited to see the right people talking to each other, and creating that kind of movement, and creating that energy that hopefully can go back into businesses, and really help. And I think, speaking to so many data leaders as I do day in day out, I think there is real change happening, and I think this is becoming such a priority. Obviously, as data sees itself more and more in the boardroom, I think ethics will just kind of follow along as a bit of a shadow, and kind of go into it. I think that the danger is that I've seen some people not be as successful as others is when they almost wear the data ethics t-shirt. And as we spoke about, I think that's where I think business struggles to understand what you're talking about, because it can become a little bit fluffy, and business doesn't deal well with fluffy, especially in the economic climate that we're in right now. They like data, they like hard facts and figures. Um, and books, I mean, I'm always going to give props and give flowers to a fantastic data leader based over in the States called Courtney Abercrombie. She is a founder of a nonprofit called AI Truth. She has a big background in, um, previously been in IBM. She's worked in corporate for many years. She understands it, and I think she gives a very pragmatic approach to AI. So go and check her out. I know she's got a couple books. So go check her out. She's amazing.
Catherine, thank you very
Sure.
much.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to chat about this.
Thank you. Okay, that's all for today. And you will find some episode notes and links to our social channels on mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.